My pleasure. Don't believe it.
I'd like to call the Education and Government Committee meeting to order. This evening we do not have any resolutions on the agenda, but three different main topics of discussion. So I'd like to dive right into that and try and get through them as quickly as possible as we've already been here for a while. First on the agenda is rules of procedure. As you all know, we've already adopted rules of procedure at the organizational meeting that were basically outlined by the Board of Supervisors. Over the past couple of months, I know a handful of you have looked at revising them, and Legislator Kelly has really taken that and run with it. So I'd like to, I know he's provided copies of what he has worked on to all the legislators, I believe. And I'd like to turn the floor over to Martin to go through those and explain the changes he's proposing.
If nobody got them, I did send it to Cheryl.
Yeah, you can make copies because that was right before the organizational meeting.
Do you have enough copies or?
Take a look at mine.
I have one more. Yeah, you got it at the health trust meeting.
Okay.
Could I have it?
I'm going to
That's
put
what
it in my
Yes.
Yeah, if you would go through and explain. You know, there's a lot of, for those of you that have had a chance and haven't, a lot of it is just language, cleaning up some language, county law references, but there are some major changes. I would be happy to summarize if you'd like, unless, and jump in, but basically there's 4 significant changes to these rules of procedures. Rules of procedure that Martin has put together. First, Rule 2A creates a majority and minority leader for the legislature. Rule 2B establishes a rule to create a seating plan.
Can I just?
Yes, go ahead at any point.
When I wrote this was before we did this arrangement, so I would say 2B really, you know, if we're at a consensus, if the legislators are at a consensus, then I think we can stick with this format, you know, district.
Third major change is Rule 18B that requires, I'll read it out for those of you that might not have it. Rule 18B, once the county budget in any given fiscal year has been adopted, it shall require a 2/3 affirmative vote of all members of the legislature to adopt resolutions authorizing the transfer of funds from any contingency line in the adopted county budget or from the fund balance. Yep.
It's actually 19, 18B is crossed out, and it's,
Yeah, there has to be renumbering because of additions and subtractions.
right.
That's why this is a draft.
Yes.
Thank you.
Care to explain your thoughts behind that?
Well, you know, I think under the previous administration, we're trying to get away from that type of mentality, and I don't think they took the budget process very seriously. You know, they'd amend and adopt a budget, and then it seems every month they were always amending. So I really think that we need to take the budget process very serious, and I understand it's only one more vote, but still, I think it means something more if we have a supermajority. And for anybody who's interested, I've asked the treasurer to come in at the finance committee next week to go over the budget so that we are more familiar with it, because that is our major purpose as the legislating body is to understand the finance of the county. And so I think it just, this rule gives the adopted budget more structure, more support.
And the last major structural change is 31.3, changing the Budget and Finance Committee to a Committee of the Whole, which I know came up at the Committee of the Whole meeting last week. So those from my reading are the major changes in Martin's proposal. But at this point, I'd like to open up discussion on these rules of procedure and see where we'd like to go. Yes.
We're challenged here a little differently than we were with our other form of government because of the possibility of having the administrative code. We're working on that. I don't want to get too far ahead of us. My question might be more geared towards Doug in regards to the 18B, the budget. Is that something that would be more in administrative code if we ended up forming one, or rules of procedure? I know now it has to be here because it's all we have, but at some point, isn't that kind of what that administrative code, what we would be formulating? Is that where something might go like that?
It certainly would be appropriate to go into the administrative code, but as you made reference, in the absence of an administrative code at the moment, if this is the type of policy that the legislature wants to adopt,
Okay.
putting it in the rules of procedure is not, in my view, inappropriate.
Okay.
Yes, Legislator Wheeler.
Were you finished, or?
Yes.
Okay, looking at this and coming from the former form of government, I always took it very seriously. But we have a whole new dynamic going forward, and there's a whole set of procedures for the government, for how we're doing the budget. This starts way earlier. So the process for us is going to be a whole, I mean, this is a whole different form of government for us. So I'm not saying necessarily that I have a problem with this. I think that this is intriguing and very forward and optimistic, even though sometimes that can be negative when we're considering government. So locking us into 2/3, if that's what this body comes out with, I would support that, absolutely. But this is what it would be, Doug, since we do not have an administrative code. You just confirmed that, right?
Yes, I believe so.
All right. Thank you.
And I think the intent behind these rules of procedure is just to further refine what we've already adopted, since it was basically coming directly from Board of Supervisors. And this is going to be evolving, I think, is sort of what the feeling and general consensus was at last week's meeting, that, you know, we had some ideas that we might want to incorporate at this point, but as the year goes on and as our terms go on, we probably will end up coming back to the rules of procedure. Yes, Legislator Diamond.
One of the, I don't have the number in front of me, but the majority and minority here would be something I couldn't support, specifically based on when I was campaigning door to door in my district. It kind of puts up a divide, and that was the last thing that the people in my district wanted, and I'm assuming the people in the town wanted. They wanted a cohesive group, bipartisanship, legislation, bipartisan government, and in my view, this is the opposite of what they wanted. Is I would be in favor of it.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Yes.
To touch a little bit on what Legislator Diamond said, and maybe I can ask Doug. With the majority and the minority leader, I mean, we, in our former life, had those. I can't remember, maybe in the 12 years that I was on board, we may have caucused a few times. I don't remember a whole lot. But what is, in your eyes, could you, I mean, a majority is a majority of one party and a minority is a minority of another. They have a leader who at any time could caucus to talk about an issue at hand, right? That's basically what it is, and maybe come to a consensus among the party, or what is your, give us your...
That isn't spelled out here. I think that would be a logical expectation of what the function of those roles would be if there was going to be a caucus. I don't recall in all the years that I've been here, both as attorney and as a member of the Board of Supervisors, the majority leader or minority leader having functions other than that with respect to caucus.
Legislator Kelly, would you care to expand upon at all what what your thoughts were behind that, the intent?
It's existed in the past, there have been those titles, I just wanted to put it in there.
Great.
And,
They are.
no, they weren't in the previous ones.
No.
The other thing I would expand on is that we're trying to get away from the past. We're trying to move forward, so. That was the other thing I picked up going door to door.
Well, thank you.
Right.
Yes.
Just wanted to throw in two observations. Minority leader, majority leader, it just smacks of New York State government, something that those particular operations I wouldn't want to affiliate myself with in any way, shape, or form. Second observation, there is no minority, there is no majority. There are 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 1 Libertarian.
Very good point. So with all of those thoughts in mind, is there a general consensus of the committee that possibly some of these we may want to move forward with, some that we may not? I'd like to sort of see if I can get a sense. Yes,
Mr.
Legislator
Chairman,
Duchesne.
I did want to bring up one more thing here, because earlier when we were discussing the format for requests for resolutions, we alluded to Rule 29, 29B in particular, and that addresses new programs. I think what I'm looking for is not that, but for each and every resolution, I'm looking for a format similar to those that are used elsewhere, so that an actual form is filled out. That would detail, give us a little more detail, so we understand better what is going on. I think a good example would be the earlier resolution regarding the transfer in the sheriff's department for that cell, as a for instance. That could have just probably wouldn't have required much discussion if we didn't been able to read some synopsis as to what that was for. And so, if permissible, I'd like to propose some formats for the committee's future discussions and see if we can come up with something.
Well, that sounds great. I think that sounds like a good plan, and you know, we can keep this on the agenda for next month, and I would welcome all possible changes to the rules of procedure, and we can go from there. And you know, I think this is, like I said, this is a transitional period, and we're going to be evolving in these rules of procedure, and you know, hopefully the adoption of an administrative code that, you know, will work hand in hand with it. So I wanted to introduce these possible changes to get the committee members and legislators as a whole thinking about these changes, and we can bring it back up in February and see where we want to go at that point. Okay.
Thank you.
Next topic of discussion, I want to group the second and third into one, charter amendments and the administrative code. This, and my feeling is these two tasks are going to be one of the largest things during this transitional period, amending the charter and creating an administrative code. 2 years ago, the voters of the county adopted this charter, but now it's our duty to ensure that it's a solid charter that it's not open to interpretation, and that it will succeed. And in order for that to succeed, there need to be amendments made. Last year, the Board of Supervisors agreed that there needed to be amendments. They brought in NISAC and have come up with a red line charter, which we all have. But it was their feeling that they wanted to leave that for us to do. So now it's our duty to follow through on that. And at the same point, the charter discusses an administrative code, which basically outlines a lot of what we started to discuss last week on how we get done what we're supposed to get done. The charter outlining our powers, but the administrative code on how we do that. To give you an idea, generally administrative codes run 200 to 500 pages. This is Fulton County's, which takes up about half of this binder. So it's no small task. And it's something with the charter as well that we do not want this. We want a document that is solid, that is indisputable in its intent. We've already run into a lot of problems with trying to figure out the intent of the charter. To clarify that within the charter first, and secondly, back it up in an administrative code, I think is imperative for us to do. So I don't really want to get into tonight what, the clarifications as we started to discuss last week, but I would like to get a general sense for how the committee and the legislature would like to move forward as far as how we're going to tackle this and a timeline to do so. Because as you know, the charter, there are going to be amendments that require permissive referendum at some future election. And that obviously gives us time constraints. So it's something we need to tackle right off the bat, I think, and really set a course for what we'd like to do. Legislator Wheeler.
Thank you. Would the legislator like possibly to ask Steve Aquario and Patrick Cummings, who did present to the Board of Supervisors, they did a lot of work. They did extensive research and analysis. So to use that information and advise us as to what they discovered and what they would recommend. We do have the red line, but it's different to just look at this rather than listen to the experts themselves. And these guys are absolutely, and if we could hear what the executive has to say on this, I think.
I just wanted to throw out there quickly, I saw Steve at the State of the State. He said, whenever you need me, call me, I will be there. We'll bring the whole team if you want. Use them as much as possible there. This is a big deal for them.
This is.
So.
And they are a resource. When I went to NISAC in September, they changed some of their formats to include Montgomery County because this was a big deal. Us changing our form of government is a wonderful endeavor. So by doing it smarter is absolutely commendable. So to do that, I think would be beneficial for all of us.
And I think we will, especially when the charter is concerned, bring in NISAC and have them, go through and explain that to us. I would like to also mention that in the charter, section 2.06, which outlines the duties of the clerk of the legislature, allows for further appointment of personnel within the legislative clerk's office to be appointed by the legislative clerk. So far this month, since we've been sworn in, we've provided for staffing for the executive office so that they can get off the ground running and take care of what they need to be done. However, we really haven't taken a second look back on what our office may or may not need. Like I said, within the charter, there is that clause that allows for that. And I wanted to bring up the idea of possibly adding to our office a deputy clerk for the reason of if Cheryl's out sick some week or day, we have nobody in that office. But further, that we could possibly create a position that not only is a deputy clerk position, but that would act as a legislative aid and even a research analyst. So for the charter, for the administrative code, for things moving forward, we would have somebody there to do that. Things that Cheryl does not have the time to do. Legislator Isabel just brought up the other day the thought of having a calendar for things that are going on legislatively. Things like that, that really at this point our office is constrained time-wise, and we are, especially this first year, going to be having to tackle some really large things legislatively. And the thought of adding a second position to that office is a possibility. Legislator Whitler.
I would support that. While Legislator Chessie has mentioned some different things that we could use a research analyst to do that. But Cheryl has been a long time employee of the county. So besides a sick day, we can't schedule when we have the flu and we're sick, and we have a full board meeting. When we had Robin, Cheryl was able to cover her then. We have nobody right now. So she also has vacation. There are times that having one person run our office, we need to set ourselves up for success, not failure. So I'm not saying necessarily jumping at it, but let's do this smarter. I would support that absolutely, and I think we could use this to the best of all of our advantage to the betterment of the county. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, Chairman.
With that thought in mind, would you, well, I guess, I mean, you brought up the idea, but is that something that you would throw on to the Personnel Committee or the Finance Committee looking for a resolution? Or are we going to discuss it? What's your goal with that?
Well, you know,
I agree with you totally. I'm just trying to figure out how we're proceeding with it.
I'm obviously very new to this. So as far as what committee it might, I think it could fall under finance, it could fall under personnel, but it also falls under education government. Could you, Doug, possibly allude, could we, if it's the committee's choice to put together a resolution to forward on to full board to create a position, or should that go to personnel or finance first?
Under your committee structure as it exists now, it certainly would strike me as a personnel issue, and probably a finance one as well. If you wanted to do it, you put forth a resolution to create the position, create a budget line item for it, and fund it as you deem fit. And once it's created, then the clerk could fill it.
So that could start from this committee, though?
Sure, I don't see why not.
Or should it be referred to personnel or finance, is what?
I don't see any reason that the notion of a resolution being sponsored couldn't be initiated here in this committee and forwarded to another committee. That would be appropriate.
Yes, Legislator Pritchett.
In our discussion in our first meeting this month, we discussed all resolutions going to Matt first before they went to committee. I don't know if that's something that we all agreed we were going to do, or...
I think that's, if you're finished, I think that's sort of resolutions for the county as a whole, and correct me if I'm wrong, but since this would be a purely internal legislative only matter, and we'd also be providing the funding for it, I do not believe that it would have to go in front of the executive.
I agree with, Brian on this. And I think it speaks to the separation and the balance. I shouldn't be meddling in what you choose to do as far as staffing. My only comment on this is if you're looking to do sponsors memos for bills and resolutions, excuse me, I've been working very closely with Cheryl. We're in the same office over the past. She's good at email. And, we're working together and we're trying to help out when we can. But I think this is a good idea. But again, this is a legislative decision and it would be under the supervision of clerk. And to me, I see a separation there. Now, Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's just my quick take on it.
I certainly would agree with that. The executive has no voice in the appointment of the clerk, and by extension of that, this type of thing would seem to rest solely with the legislature as well.
They've got legislator Diamond, DeChessie, and then Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I like the concept. What I'd like to see is maybe a shared position with economic development. I know they're short-staffed. They're always looking for administrative aides, and it could be someone. If you go to the research part of it, the resources for research are in the economic development office, the databases, the information about the county, things like that. The other thing is that this person could fill in for Cheryl. She was on vacation or out ill. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Vacation, I hope doesn't happen.
Just so you know, I have 175 hours of vacation tonight.
And the other thing to keep in mind are the resolutions will probably be cut in half this year. So, I like the concept. I would like to see at least a shared position with economic development, and looking forward to see how it progresses.
Legislator DeChessie.
Mr. Chairman, I like the idea a lot, and I see no reason why you can't do it through your committee. The only thing I think that we need to check on are to see if there are any existing similar civil service positions and how those job duties and descriptions are delineated. And we should check with civil service to find out if that's the case. Other than that, I think that this committee certainly could make that appointment.
Legislator Kelly?
No, he still has to sign the bill if it so passes, right? Being he is the budget.
Yeah.
I don't know what your title is when it comes to the
Yeah,
budget officer.
Yeah, no, I would have to either approve, veto, or no action on everything that comes through.
And then also, I like the idea of sharing people, but as we're talking about separation of powers, it's nothing against Ken, but Ken's department is part of the executive department, according to the charter. So if we're going to maintain the separation of powers,
Sorry, I didn't mean for that to be audible enough to stop you.
it's in Article 5 of the charter. If anyone wants to read it.
Legislator Quackenbush.
Yeah, I mean, while the position would be through the legislature's office, and I don't want to use the word dictated or authority through the legislature, I don't think that would prevent the legislature from saying, hey, by the way, there's a little bit of work we want to do over in economic development today, or some research that needs to be done that would prevent us from having that person do that just with that simple. But I agree with Martin said. I think there is that clear separation. I think there's a way around it to make what I think I hear Legislator Diamond saying.
Legislator Kuchar.
And my observation just kind of mirrors what Martin and Tom said, that basically if we do decide to hire someone, a deputy clerk, I think their loyalties or priorities should be Cheryl in the legislature, and then only if low on work or something like that, then share.
Legislator Wheeler.
Okay, so I'm gonna piggyback over there, and if Matt is using his communication specialist, which I jumped on board as soon as I heard about it, and it really, I turned because it was such a thing, and if that position is going from the county executive to support economic development, our person can support, so economic development, which is all of us, I think, can agree, is a huge priority for Montgomery County. That department is getting support from both branches, even though there is still a clear separation of us. So I love it. I didn't realize that economic development was under the executive, so.
Well, technically, all departments.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I would like, I think it would be more prudent to, if we're talking about changes to departments,
Right.
we focus on those departments as they are. Tying it into a position like this might cause some issues. So I'm just going to just put that out there. But I'm open to it. And in regards to the communication person, I'm more than willing to share. As I've said in the past, I want to get the good word out about what we're doing in this county. So that's, so for there, my issue isn't so much with the separation, because I think we can work together there. But yeah, I think just a little note of caution, because I know we talked, there's been some talks about changes to economic development, there's been some talks about changes in DPW, and we're taking our time to make sure we think these things through. Tying it together might cause, it might not be the most appropriate way forward, but we'll see.
I think with everything said, it sounds, this is, obviously we can't have a shared position where it's funded on, especially for budgeting, it probably would create a nightmare, and under the charter it would, but we're a small county here. The communication specialist is going to do, communicate on things other than just in the executive's office. It's sort of, all of these positions will, and I think the same will happen if we move forward with this deputy clerk, legislative aid, research analyst position, that it wouldn't be, obviously, first and foremost, deputy clerk, and then, wherever they're needed. Legislator Bieniek.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on what Matt said, because he was thinking what I was thinking. My past experience talking to the department heads, over the last 4 or 5 years, their departments have been hurt by the budget cuts, whether it's staffing or funding. So I don't even know if shared services is going to help them. They actually need to be brought back up to the levels they were previously. So, but obviously we have to be smart about it. But I think the departments in the county actually are going to need more than just shared services. So that's all I want to say.
Legislator Quackenbush.
If I could, to Doug, could a resolution under other come from the committee tonight that would have to have an amendment at the full board meeting 2 weeks from now to fill in a price tag, obviously, and a title? So we need 2 amendments, price and a title. But otherwise, if you don't, but I guess what I'm thinking is you're going to actually, again, it's up to you folks, but you're going to actually put this off till February if you didn't do it at tonight's meeting, as Duke said, or as Duke indicated through this committee. If you didn't do it, then you'd have to either do it to personnel or finance, or wait another month, which, if you think it's okay to wait, that's fine. But I guess what I'm alluding to is you really only need 2 amendments for this. A price of where it's coming in and out of, which would, whether it be fund balance, contingency, and a title, which I believe Richie, which Personnel Officer Bay could research, as Legislator Duchesne said, pretty easily within the next, it didn't take long to.
Yeah, there's some issues whether it's going to be classified, unclassified, or exempt, or what the language is, or civil service. You're going to have to figure those issues out, and then you're going to have to adjust to salary, and so, but it's, we're not moving a mountain here. No reason why I can't do it.
The unclassified left it pretty broad for you. That's why you wanted that.
And that's why I wanted, and I would
same.
think the legislature would want the same.
Yeah.
And I think,
Go ahead.
Excuse me.
So you could, if you wanted to, or am I wrong, Tom?
Sure, no reason you couldn't.
Sponsor that out, creating the position and then the resolution. But if you don't want to do that and you want to wait, then wait.
and I guess I can only expand on that, that time, and I spoke on it earlier, time is of the essence. If we want to put charter amendments on the ballot this November, we have time constraints. We have to draft an administrative code that we should have had 2 weeks ago. And obviously, you know, this is a transitional period. We couldn't have an administrative code 2 weeks ago. There was no way of doing that, but we need it as soon as possible. And I think with that in mind, I think that, you know, putting together a resolution with those blanks tonight would be, and passing that on, if that's the thought of the committee, would be wise. Legislator Keller.
Just to add support to having the resolution come from this committee, you know, the clerk of the board does fall under,
Yes.
so, you know, I don't see any reason for postponing this to.
Well, with all of that in mind, it doesn't sound like there's, you know, it sounds like there's a consensus of the committee. I would like to sponsor a resolution creating a position that will be a blank until the full board, and salary with a blank to move forward in, let's see, so it would be a position in the office of the legislature. I'd look for a second.
I'll second.
Legislator Wheeler. Discussion?
Yes.
Legislator.
You second.
She
You got it already?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Are you going to include in that resolution who has the authority to appoint that person?
It's in the charter. Legislator 206 states, from time to time, the clerk shall appoint such additional personnel as are required for the efficient operation of the office of the clerk within the appropriations provided therefore.
Thank you.
So we will not be naming, that will not be an amendment. The title and salary will be, and some of that will come from the personnel director, but the actual position will be appointed, if we move forward as such, by Cheryl. Legislator Quackenbush.
I might be out of school here, but we haven't heard anything from Cheryl. Could we?
Well, this is the first I'm hearing all of this, so, I mean, I've expressed to you as chairman that, you know, the charter did say that I could have a deputy. And, I mean, as Matt pointed out, you guys, there's a lot of work to be done, and I can't do it by myself. It's impossible. So, you know, two thoughts that I have is, number one, yes, there needs to be a deputy, but if you're discussing doing an administrative code, that's not a part-time person, that's not a shared person, that's someone that you want dedicated to doing that. And then that person could also serve as a fill-in for me, you know, as a deputy. But, I mean, I don't know, my mind is spinning right now thinking about this, so. I think it's great. I definitely think it's needed, and it's needed like not 2 months from now.
That's all, thank you.
Thank you. And, you know, exactly what Cheryl said, you know, this is not going to be an easy task to put a document together like this, and, you know. Actually, no, you know what, some of the pages are. See, look at that, Marion. So, with the sponsorship in the second, any further discussion? Recommendation of the committee?
Do you want to move it to another committee?
I think, you know, it sounds like we can move it to full board.
Yeah, we have nothing for the personnel committee right now, so as of right now, we're not having one.
Yeah.
So I'm comfortable.
So recommendation being moved to full board?
Move to full board.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Any other business? Yes?
Can you speak of a general announcement, is this appropriate?
Sure.
There's been some talk about the acting county executive, now we're talking about what happens if someone's sick or on vacation. I just thought this would be an appropriate time. When looking at the charter, it looks like it needs to be someone on the executive side of department head, there's some clear language in there. And so I thought of someone, reached out, had a conversation, and I'm very proud to say that Lucille Sitterly, Director of Probation, will be our acting county executive, and I will be filing that paperwork with Cheryl tomorrow. Lucille has been a faithful worker in this county for a long time. She's a rock solid person. I don't think I could have made a better choice, so, please extend your congratulations to her if you see her.
That's excellent.
Great.
Excellent.
Hearing no other business, I'll look for a
Motion.
I just want to commend the legislators, you all did, in my opinion, I thought you did a great job tonight in regards to this whole, I know a lot of us knew, Joe was beating himself up there, but he really did it, you guys all did it.
Let me tell you, saying legislator Quackenbush, legislator Diamond, it's a mouthful after you do it a couple times. Yeah.
It's the same number of syllables as super.
Well, it's a mouthful. Motion to adjourn, second.
Try saying it. Wow.
You did good, Ron.
Does